Auf jeden Fall waren wir gerade bei einem neuen J-Laser-Video, was wir uns anschauen wollten, der hier Aerogel, das ist glaube ich so ein super, super leichtes Material, in Schuhe reingebaut hat. Das ist irgendwie aus Black Panther, kenne ich jetzt persönlich nicht so. Also den Film habe ich gesehen, aber ich erinnere mich nicht unbedingt an die Schuhe. Aber J-Laser macht natürlich immer geile Sachen. Hier natürlich den Hawkeye haben wir zuletzt geguckt. Schauen wir direkt mal rein. Los geht's, Leute. Ich habe nicht aufgepasst, ich will nochmal gucken gerade. Nochmal. Okay, so sieht es im Film aus. Klar, Visual Effects so. Und das ist seine Version. Oha! Die wickeln sich so von selbst um deinen Fuß rum. Ah, wie crazy, was er davor hat. Bin gespannt, wie es funktioniert. Muss ja irgendwie so vakuummäßig funktionieren. Also es ist irgendwie so Luft rausgezogen wird und dadurch zieht es sich irgendwie fest. Also anders kann ich es mir irgendwie nicht vorstellen.
So here's the clip of the Black Panther shoes. By the way, R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman, just a phenomenal actor and such an inspiration.
Try them on.
So as we see, the shoes start out just as soles, but when you step on them, they expand with this really cool glitch-style nanoparticles to surround the foot and create a shoe. And it looks super sick too, but come on, Marvel, what's wrong with laces? Oh well. But the important part is the soundproofing. As Shuri says,
I made them completely sound absorbent.
Alright, so the checklist. We're gonna make these shoes automatically appear on your foot from
Sound absorbent, das heißt, man hört dich nicht, wie du läufst oder was?
the sole of the shoe and make them
Gruselig.
sound absorbent. And, you know, probably throw in some Black Panther claws for good measure. Should be fun. So to make sound absorbent shoes, we kind of have to understand what sound actually is. So to keep things interesting, I'm going to be using this boom device from my last video. Basically a CO2 canister inside a pressure chamber with some paint powder inside. So all we got to do, pull the pin,
cool idee.
CO2 pops. Yeah, now we probably should run. So as you might know, sound is just the difference in air pressure. So when the CO2 pressure is high enough, the shell breaks rapidly. This causes a sudden high pressure area, which slams into the surrounding air, which slams into more surrounding air. And we get a nice pressure wave.
Und das kommt dann gegen unser Trommelfell und das interpretiert dann unser Gehirn als Ton.
That expands outwards, losing a bit of energy with each collision, of course. And this makes up the sound we hear, which is why the further away we are, the quieter it sounds. And like super slow-mo stuff, you can actually see the pressure wave, because the refraction index of the compressed air is different than the surrounding air. My camera's not quite fast enough to pick that up, but the powder paint kind of gives you an idea of the expansion. Thank you, class, that is all. Please do the reading for Monday. Hey, who's talking? Get back to work. The same thing happens when you take a step just at lower volume. So the goal is to stop that pressure wave from reaching an ear one way or another.
Aber wie?
You take a step, there's a few sounds we gotta think about. First, you have the initial impact sound that you would expect. But then you also have reverberations from the deformation of the material you're walking on, like a creaking floor, for example. Now that part would be super hard to control, but thankfully the movie actually said sound absorbent.
Completely sound absorbent.
And if you listen closely, you can actually hear some slight reverberations when he's moving his feet. So I think we dodged that bullet. Finally, Marvel's using some
Ist so krass, ne? Ich gucke so gerne Videos von ihm.
physics for once. Yeah, never mind.
Ich muss auch sagen, so MCU auch so geile Filme gewesen, oder Leute, mal ehrlich.
Alright, so the goal is not to have sound created by the shoe reach the ear of a listener. If we're assuming the listener is a human, then we only care about sounds from the 20 to 20,000 hertz range. So you can reflect sound, which is more like soundproofing. You can absorb the sound, which is what they said in the movies. And you can also cancel out the sound with other sound through active noise cancellation. Or you could just
Das ist wie in den Kopfhörern, die wir zum Beispiel, also wenn du so ein neues kennst, den Kopfhörer hast.
not make the sound at all. Now, I don't think reflections are
Ich will das kaufen, was er baut. Wenn er so einen Shop hätte, wo man die Sachen kaufen könnte, die er baut, ey, anders krass.
gonna help us much here. So let's start with absorption. So you can think of this as like throwing a rubber ball at concrete versus a pillow. Pillow's gonna stop it by absorbing the impact, while the concrete is gonna bounce it back. And remember, we want that ball stopped, because if it reaches an ear, they're gonna know something's up. So since sound travels through air for our purposes, you know, we're not fish, we want a material that lets air in but then traps it. So maybe slightly porous, but not so much so that it just lets the air right through. So I hopped online and ordered a bunch of stuff that I thought might work. We got foam, acoustic.
Stimmt, dieses, was ich hier auch habe, also es sind keine Schallabsorber hier, Absorber hier an der Wand, sondern das sind Diffusoren, die verteilen den Sound nur mehr, dass ich halt keinen großen Hall hier drin habe. Stimmt, so einfach so normale Schaumstoffabsorber für so Musikstudios.
Acoustic sound panels, leather, rock wool, socks, bare feet, and some special pads for your feet that supposedly help you walk quieter. And I also got a decibel meter so we can more accurately track the sound levels. So for a control, we got some regular Air Force One shoes, and then we can see which material actually makes these quieter. But you know, I feel like these shoes just aren't Black Panther enough for this video. So let's fix that.
Zeichnen kann der auch noch? Was ist das für ein Multitalent?
Yep, that's better. We got the Black Panther on one side, and then I did this like claw gash mark thing on the other with the Nike swish. I think they came out pretty good. So we're gonna attach all the different materials to the sole of the shoe to see which one makes it the quietest. So I'm doing this experiment on concrete to eliminate any potential floor noise. I set the decibel meter along the floor and marked out a walkway next to it with markers for step length, with the closest step point being a foot from the decibel meter. I figured I'd run each test 5 times, trying to walk as consistently as possible. Do this for all the materials, take an average, and compare the results. So here's what I found.
Boah, keine Ahnung, ich kann gar nicht einschätzen, was davon am leisesten ist. Ich glaube, so schaumstoffmäßige Sachen würden ja so nach meinem ersten Gefühl das leiseste sein.
First, Air Force Ones, not good sneakers. They made the most noise except for the pink foam, which is honestly just laughable. Then we got leather, soundboard, memory foam, the sneak shoe product, Rockwool, feet skin, then
Memory Foam ist am besten. Soundboard. Ach, guck mal, ich glaube, das als Soundboard ist, glaube ich, das, was ich meinte mit diesem Studio-Zeug.
And I also learned that my feet click apparently. Doesn't hurt at all. Not sure if it's healthy, but it's super annoying, especially for this test when I was trying to get clean results. I did my best not to click them. Warming them up helped, so yeah, just in case you wanted to know that. But during these tests, I noticed there's even more noise sources than I thought. You have the initial impact, but you also have a sound from the rubbing of the material. So some materials
Boah, das war irgendwie ASMR satisfying gerade der Sound, oder?
are better at dampening impact, like the memory foam and Rockwool, because they're like pretty spongy, they have a lot of give. And other materials are better at preventing that rubbing sound, like the socks and bare feet. So I thought, what if we combine this memory foam with the less sneaky material like the soundboard? Sure enough, it worked the best. We still have some slight squeaks from the shoe.
48 dB ist aber schon trotzdem noch nicht komplett still.
They're just not good for sneaking.
Also so ein Uhrticken bzw. Atmen sind so 10 dB. Nur mal so als Vergleich, wenn ich es nicht richtig im Kopf
So I
habe.
don't think we're going to be able to use them for this project. Still give them away though, can't forget that. But I tried just the memory foam and fabric and it worked even better. Just 2 decibels above the ambient noise of the room. 17 decibels lower than the control Air Force Ones. So I'd say we're off to a good start. But another idea that might help is that active noise cancellation I was talking about. It's pretty common in headphones nowadays, and it works by canceling out one noise with another noise. Let me show you. Alright, so we've got 2 speakers right here. I'm going to play a tone at 400 hertz through one of them. Try and keep the audio consistent, but we've also got a decibel meter in the center, so you can see how loud it is. About 77
Jetzt kommt Phasing, Leute.
decibels. Now I'm going to play the same sound
Glaube ich,
with
oder?
both of them. I'm going to connect up the second speaker and play the sound. Around 83 decibels now. It gets louder, right? Well, now I'm going to flip the polarity on one of the speakers. So the speaker on the right will be playing the inverse tone. So they're playing the sound out of phase right now. Ready? I'm going to disconnect one of the speakers. It gets louder even though it's playing less sound. Ready? And check this out. They're out of phase right now. But if I cover one speaker, or bring it away, even though I'm getting rid of one speaker, the sound increases.
Krass.
So that's the basic principle of how it works. Cancels out sound with sound. You can even do it with this one too. Sound decreases, increases.
Ich verstehe es nicht so ganz, was genau er jetzt demonstrieren will, to be honest, aber ich finde es trotzdem irgendwie voll funky. Keine Ahnung, es ist so ein ganz weirdes Ding von, ich tue es nicht so richtig verstehen, was der Punkt genau ist gerade, aber irgendwie ist es trotzdem mit diesem ganzen Wegdrehen und das wird lauter, ist irgendwie trotzdem total weird.
Alright, so here's a better way to visualize it. If we drop something in water, we'd be using this Iron Man Lego piece that's got my face on it. Yep, huge flex right here. But if we drop it in water, it's gonna create ripples, just like a sound wave. Oh, look at that, it came back up. But when we drop 2 objects in water at the same time, points where the ripples cross path, they interfere with each
Das ist eine sehr gute Erklärung.
destructively and constructively. So a peak and a peak interfere constructively, and a trough and a peak interfere destructively, canceling each other out, which is how noise cancellation works. Wow, I'm like a physics teacher. Anyways, I thought about trying to use something like this in the shoes, with a microphone to pick up the noise of our steps, and then like a 360 speaker to put out opposite cancellation noise. Now, in theory, I still think
Allein, dass er sich damit schon so beschäftigen musste für seine Schuhe, ist so krass.
it would work. But at the moment, I don't have good enough tools to make this actually happen, because the area of the noise source and the area of the inverse sound are very important. Ideally, they should be as close together as possible, so they can interfere destructively. Like, I'm talking hundredth of a millimeter to make it most effective. Otherwise,
Ach
you'll
du
just
Scheiße.
double the noise as we
Aber
saw
das
in
geht
the
doch
demo.
fast gar nicht,
So I
oder?
do think it's possible because we do know the location of the sound where your foot contacts the ground. I just don't have the resources to make that happen at the moment. but cool idea. So the last one to prevent sound is just not.
Das wäre voll krass, aber kann ich nicht machen.
Basically, that means limiting the contact with the ground. Like, that's why tiptoeing is so effective. Less surface area, less noise. So I'm gonna try and make like the sole of these shoes as small as possible. That's why I don't think those large sneak shoes worked as well as they could have, just because of the giant surface area. So we're definitely making progress now, but I still want something to make them just a little bit quieter. You know, really make them special, because right now they're just glorified slippers, even though they've already beaten both the sneak shoes and actual slippers I tested. So after a bit more digging,
Was hast du denn den ganzen Tag gemacht? Bin vor dem Mikrofon mit 1000 verschiedenen Sohlen und Schuhen lang gelaufen.
came across the wildly popular aerogel video. Shout out to Veritasium. Basically, to summarize, this material is 99% air, and it's created by evaporating off the liquid inside a gel, so you're just left with the structure of the gel. This results in an extremely low density material with extremely low thermal and sound conductivity as well. Like, the matrix structure of this aerogel is on the order of like 5 nanometers, which gives it these amazing sound and energy trapping properties. The only issue is this stuff is extremely fragile, and it
Und auch teuer, oder? Das sieht total funky aus. Sieht irgendwie nicht ganz echt aus, das Zeug, oder?
shatters like glass if you touch it in just the wrong way. It's not very practical if we're trying to make a shoe. Thankfully, slight alterations can be made to turn this material into what's known as an aeraloy. This material is still as light as 0.1 grams per cubic centimeter, but now it's also
krass.
super strong. Like, some of these materials can hold up to 20,000 times their own weight. According to interesting engineering, this material is 100 to 1,000 times better than any other product on the market for sound insulation. That's what I'm talking
Das klingt krass.
about. But this material is super rigid, so it's great for walls and stuff, but again, not great for flexible shoes. Also, it's super expensive too. Like, 4 of these little cubes of it cost $500. You can't even use them for the shoes because they're
Der gönnt sich, Alter. 4 von diesen kleinen Würfeln, 500 Euro, gönn.
not flexible. Yeah, definitely hit that like button. But luckily, some researchers in Singapore have made flexible aerogel insulation possible. That's supposedly 30% to 40% better than anything else out there on the market. So
Und wie bekommt ihr
I
das?
ordered some of that, but while we wait for that to get here, let's figure out how we're actually gonna get the shoes to pop up on our feet.
Das ist der interessante Part.
So at first I thought about using motors to do this, like pull the material over our foot. Even nitinol could work. But every way I tried to imagine that, it just got really complicated. Like, once you add motors and electronics into a shoe, that's just a recipe for disaster. Like, you're gonna walk through a puddle and it's gonna break. So after watching back the video probably too many times, I realized elastics might actually be the answer. Rubber bands and stuff, they love to go from big to small. And the sole of a shoe is definitely bigger than like an ankle. So I 3D printed a shoe type mold and fit a rubber band around the outside. Now when I slide the rubber band off the lip, it instantly snaps up around my ankle. So then I tried to attach some fabric to the band. But the issue is, fabric's not nearly as stretchy as a rubber band. So I had to make some cuts on the side. Like, this kind of worked, but it was super sloppy, and now we have holes
Nicht so der
in our
Designer-Schuh.
shoes. So I realized for this to completely work the way I want it to, the whole thing's gonna have to be made of rubber. So I went online again and got pretty much every rubber thing I could think of that might work for this. I'm talking bands, balloons, gloves. I even found some of these rubber shoe covers. And luckily enough, one of these shoe covers actually worked perfectly. It was the right amount of flexibility, and it already looks kind of stealthy. So I made a prototype out of acoustic board this time, because it's got some rigidity to it, so it can keep the elastic around the outside, and it's also sound dampening too. Then I just 3D printed some end pieces to act as the lips to keep the elastic stressed around the outside. They also have a lever in them that when you push it, pushes the elastic
Ich frage mich, baut das wirklich alles komplett alleine? Das ist total
up
krass.
over the top of the ridge and snaps it up onto your foot. And this ended up working great. The rubber is stretchy enough to unroll itself onto my foot, and the lips keep the shoes primed until
Es
we
ist
step
so
on.
simpel,
I
aber es
figured,
sieht,
we'd put some
boah, das sah so satisfying aus. Es ist so simpel, aber es ist trotzdem irgendwie Hightech.
foam on the bottom, along with some of that aeraloy insulation, and we should be good. But you know, what's a Black Panther video without claws? So let's make those. So I actually made some of these a while back, but I'm gonna do an updated version that's up to my new standards. Basically, we're gonna use X-Acto blades for the claws attached to springs. The spring will decompress into a tube that we mount on our fingers when the claws are retracted. To activate the claws, we'll attach a string to the back with a small knot that catches on a little notch in the back of the tube until we pull it. The knot releases and the claw springs out. Perfect, I'll take 5.
Schon geil. Boah, das hat mich gerade mega an Name Knife Street erinnert. Irgendwie sieht die schon cheap aus, aber auch cool. Das ist so ein ganz weirdes Zwischending.
Alright, so finally the aeraloy insulation is here. It's super spongy, but again, we've got that aerogel nanocrystals inside, which you can actually see here. Some of them are falling out. Just small
Wie teuer war das jetzt schon
pieces of
wieder? Frag
aerogel,
ich
really.
mich.
But I think the solution is fitting, given all the nanotech that Marvel uses. So I put everything together, gave it a little paint job, and now we have some sound-absorbent, step-activated Black Panther shoes.
Boah, der Song, den da gerade die ganze Zeit benutzt, ist echt geil.
The shoes now have 2 layers of soundboard, a layer of aerogel, a layer of foam, then more aerogel, and then I ended up covering them with some fluffy fabric because it makes almost no rubbing noise. I also drew a little Wakanda-inspired design on them, and of course they snap on your foot when you step onto them. Yeah, I think they came out
Das
okay.
ist schon
Before we
hart
test them out, I want to show off
satisfying.
some of the
Ich will die Tests jetzt sehen mit diesen Dingern. Mit den Claws zusammen. Wie leise sind die vor allem?
shoes are making on the decibel meter. Like you can see when I take a step, the shoes compress thanks to the foam, slowing down the initial impact of my foot. Then the soundboard and the aerogel insulation also help dampen the impact, along with any squeaks from the shoe. I mean, if I really boost the audio, you can slightly hear footsteps, but it's mixed in with like the rustling of the trees and the wind and other ambient noises outside. Like if I black out the screen and play the same noise, like you can't
Krass,
tell
die
this
sind echt heftig leise, die Schuhe.
steps. I was literally walking
Man hört ihn wirklich nur ganz, ganz leise.
circles around the decibel meter and it wasn't picking up anything. I also did a running test too, and compared to the control, it did great.
Hä, das ist ganz weird. Das ist ganz, ganz weird. Wie bei E-Autos, die man nicht hört, wenn sie fahren. Das ist ganz, ganz komisch.
And because the shoes, they actually provide protection to your feet, so better than trying to sneak around barefoot. Now, obviously, like these things aren't magic. Like if you walk on a creaky floor, it's still gonna make noise. And the quieter you try to walk, the better they're gonna do. But the foam gives you a little bit of leeway, so you can take a kind of a hard step and it'll still sound pretty quiet. Combine that with the claws. Ooh, Marvel put me in a movie. So I
Erstmal Marvel
hope you
anrufen.
enjoyed this video, guys. If you did, definitely like, subscribe.
So ein starkes Video, Alter. So ein starkes
Schönes
Video.
Video.
Bitte abonniert meine Channels. Danke. Stay curious. Lol.